Yesterday, ESPN released their 2022 College Football Power Index, which conveniently for content purposes has Auburn and Texas both in the top 10, which is disgusting. So we will be dissecting that, shredding those two teams for being in the top 10, as well as praising the FPI for, in my opinion, properly selecting other teams to be in specific positions, whether it's certain teams in the top 10, top 15, top 25, whatever. We are reviewing the top 25 for the most part of the FPI today, as long as briefly mentioning some teams who are outside of the top 25 that could make a run for being in a top 25 or even a top 15. For example, Arkansas, Tennessee, Iowa State, Cincinnati, Nebraska, USC, all those teams I mentioned, they're not in the top 25 of ESPN's FPI. So it's going to be all college football today, per usual. And if you don't know what the FPI is, I'm going to take just a few seconds to briefly explain it. It's a computer algorithm which takes multiple factors into account: recruiting classes, transfer portal classes, returning starters, with, this is an important note, an emphasis at the quarterback position, total team talent, a team's success over the past 4 years, with, once again, emphasis on the most previous seasons. That would be the 2021 season, obviously, and some other factors as well, all meshed together. And through that process, after everything's meshed, merged, whatever you want to call it, the FPI spits out a number and a ranking assigned to each team that helps determine their projected win-loss record, their percent chance to win out. Since this is the preseason, that means their percent chance to go undefeated, their chance to win 6 games, win their division, win the conference, win the playoff, and even make the national title and win the national title. Though the FPI is not nearly as accurate when it comes to the playoff and national title predictions as it is for all other factors or predictions that I just mentioned. So let's get right into it and show you guys ESPN's Football Power Index. So we are going to do something a little different here. I am going to go through the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good are teams that they fit in the positions they are or around, in my opinion. The bad are teams that are questionable, but there are reasons they can be there, but I really don't agree with their placement. And the ugly are teams that are why. For example, why is Texas at 6? Same thing with Auburn. But we are going to start out with the good. We'll save the best for content and the worst for rankings for last. So to start off, the good. ESPN's top 25, I'd say, is overall average, above average, overall closer to good than bad. And that's mainly because the top 10, which matters the most, as this sport is playoff and New Year's Six Bowl centered, more so playoff centered, is that most of the top 10, in my opinion, is good, I think. I like the placements of Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia. I have Ohio State as my number 1 team, but they're number 2. I have Georgia as my number 3 team. And I think Alabama and Ohio State can be interchangeable for the number 1 and number 2 spots. Even Georgia, if you want to make it interchangeable. I think all 3 of those teams, Alabama, Ohio State, less so Georgia, but still, they return a lot. They have a solid coaching staff. Kirby Smart finally won a national title, which is a hard thing to do. He's checked every box. Why can't he win it again? The top 3 of this list can be interchangeable, and it would not be bad. So 1, 2, and 3 are all W rankings, in my opinion. Michigan in the top 10. I have them a little higher. I actually have them at 4, though I don't have them reaching the playoff. I think they're the 4th best team, but that doesn't mean they're going to reach the playoff because of their weak strength of schedule, and a loss to Ohio State would likely kick them out. But Michigan in the top 10, they're only 3 spots away from where I have them that's a good spot. They return nearly their entire offense outside of two O-linemen and star running back Hassan Haskins, who will be missed dearly, but there's a very deep running back room behind him. Oklahoma at 8 and Pittsburgh at 9 are also good listings. So right off the bat, that's 6 out of 10 teams that I think perfectly fit in their positions, or at least they fit well in their rankings. Oklahoma, yes, they lose Caleb Williams, they lose Lincoln Riley, but they return a lot of the good aspects of their staff from last year, like Bill Biedenbaugh and Cale Gundy, two really good offensive coaches, still are on the staff. Biedenbaugh is known for developing great offensive lines. An offensive line outside of quarterback is, I would say, the most important position on the offense, maybe even more important than quarterback, depending on who you ask. And with Brent Venables, Oklahoma's going to be focusing more on defense now. And I think having an offensive blueprint left behind from Lincoln Riley, combined with improvements on defense, can really put this team in a position to just pick up from where they left off. Pittsburgh at 9, they return 16 starters. And look, I know they lose Kenny Pickett. They also lose Mark Whipple, their OC. But they return Jordan Addison. They return the entirety of their defensive line, which was one of the best in the nation last year. They have an all-right transfer portal and recruiting class combined. Transfer portal is the most important, as they're all, I think, mostly linebackers and secondary players, which will help because those two places on defense is where they lose the most production. Their defense should improve. Their offense should take a slight step back, and I only say slight because Patty looked like a really good quarterback from what I saw, and I think Keaton Slovis will benefit under a new coaching staff that is far superior to Clay Helton's at USC. So for the top 10, that's good. I would say some other teams that are a part of the good would be Michigan State at 16, Miami at 18, Ole Miss at 17. I'd say Oklahoma State at 13, I'd say is a little low, but overall that's good. I can see that too. And for those teams, it's really just they're not good enough to be top 10. They don't have the talent overall, or in the case of Miami, it's year 1, so some things are going to need to be worked out. But I like the placement. I think that Michigan State, Ole Miss, and Miami and Oklahoma State will at minimum be top 25, teams. At most, they can be top 15, maybe top 10. I think Oklahoma State, out of all of these teams, is most likely to be top 10. But those are, I would say, the good. Same with Baylor at 19, actually. Baylor at 19. So right there again, Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, Oklahoma, Pittsburgh, Oklahoma State, Michigan State, Ole Miss, Miami, and Baylor. I think that's 11 teams. 11 teams are ranked in the good. I love where they are placed. I think they're placed perfectly. And just before we get into the bad, the 25 to 20 area, you can put a ton of different teams there. There's a whole lot of debate, especially in that section. So we're not really going to be heavily criticizing that section. All the teams listed there, except for maybe Florida, I can see being where they're ranked. So we're really not going to be criticizing any of those areas. Now we're on to the bad. Not the ugly yet, just the bad. The bad, we're going to start off with Clemson. Clemson, their defense looked elite in the spring game, and their defense was elite this past season. So to a certain degree, along with Dabo still being the head coach, I have to give them some benefit of the doubt. I have them as a top 15 team. Same with Notre Dame, who was also a part of the bad. Here's the issue with these two teams, though. Clemson has to have an offense. DJ Uiagalelei, and a lot of people can't pronounce his name, but I think I pronounced it properly this time. He is not a good quarterback. He's close to Graham Mertz bad, though not at that horrible level. But regardless, he's not a good QB. They need improved QB play. Their O-line allowed like 13 sacks in the spring game, and part of that might have been due to injury, or something else. I'm not very deep into Clemson, I will admit, but they need better wide receivers. They need just better offense before I think they can be placed in a top 4. Notre Dame, I'd say, is almost more questionable, though. And part of that's due to just what they have leaving. I mean, Kyle Hamilton, Kyron Williams, arguably their 2 best players, gone. Mike Elston, who was one of the best recruiters on that staff, was one of the best coaches on that staff. He's gone. He's gone to Michigan. Tommy Rees, the OC, returns. Al Golden is their DC, which I really didn't know what to think of that hire. And I think that in year one of Marcus Freeman, there's going to be a little bit of growing pain. Now, I could be wrong. And again, Notre Dame and Clemson are in the bad. They're not in the ugly. I can actually see them being where they are ranked. It's just hard for me, but I can at least see it. Notre Dame, they have talent. I think Marcus Freeman, I think him being at Notre Dame will work out better than Brian Kelly at LSU. I think that his youth and his energy can help them maybe overcome some recruiting humps, though they've gotten top 15 and even top 10 classes before. Maybe he can take them to that top 5 level. Clemson, it's Dabo Swinney. Guy's won 2 national titles. He's beaten Nick Saban twice. At this point, he can do anything. Other teams on the bad list, I would say, are Utah, Texas A&M. Utah, I think they're underrated in this list. I think that with Cameron Rising returning, they do lose Devin Lloyd, but they return so much. Andy Ludwig and Morgan Scaley are really good coordinators. Ludwig's the OC, Scaley is the DC, and Kyle Whittingham is also a really good head coach. Texas A&M, I don't think this is their year quite yet. That recruiting class, I think, will need more than just a few months to cycle through and have that full impact. And their quarterback play looked atrocious in the spring game, to say the least. And I think they've downgraded at O-line as well. Another team in the bad position, I would say, is Penn State. They're the closest to the ugly out of the bad teams. Penn State, I think, is not going to be a top 25 team this year. I think that with Clifford returning, the O-line doesn't look to improve much. They lose Jaquan Brisker. They lose a great majority of their secondary, actually, and lose Brent Pry, who I thought was one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. I don't think Manny Diaz is going to fully replace him to that capacity. I think that this is going to be a year where they just have to wait. They have to keep floating. They have to keep floating in the ocean, overcome every wave. They have to stay afloat. I think 2023, when Aller, Singleton, those two, especially on the offense, will cycle through. They'll be more experienced. They'll be even better, if just giving them some benefit of the doubt because they're 5 stars. But I could see Penn State being a top 15 team. They've done it before. James Franklin has won several 11-win seasons there. Their defense, especially their front 7, should be overall solid, and their O-line and run game can improve. There is certainly a possibility that that can improve. So that's the bad. And again, number 20 through number 25, we're not really going to be talking about because that's a little bit more uncertain. In my opinion, it's much harder to predict that section of a top 25 than it is the top 4. Honestly, because this year, this past season, 2021, who made it to the national title again? Alabama and Georgia, who a lot of people had in their top 4. You look at the top 25 at the end of the year with all those teams in there. I don't know how many people accurately predicted who was all in the 20 to 25 range. But that was the good and the bad. We'll now move on to the ugly and then talk about some teams outside of the top 25 that are teams of interest, and then we'll be done with this video. So the ugly. Let's start off with Texas. I'm looking at the logo on my screen, talking about this right now. There is smoke. There is smoke coming out of my ears. I don't even watch much of Texas football. And That's because I'm a Big Ten guy. Texas, I gave them some hope this past season. Thought they could go 8-4, 9-3. They had all the pieces, and once again, it all fell apart. Why are they at number 6? I don't know exactly why, because I'm not in on ESPN's FPI calculations, nor am I an absolute genius who can do all this by myself. I don't have the manpower nor the brain power to calculate 100% as to why Texas is at 6, but I can give an educated guess. And my educated guess is that Quinn Ewers, Bijan Robinson, and Xavier Worthy are there and returning. Now, if they had a good O-line and a good defense, then yes, it would make sense as to why they could be at number 6. That is an explosive trio of players. Absolutely explosive. Explosive, tough, you name it. At least Xavier Worthy and Robinson. We haven't even seen Ewers play yet, so pardon me. But they have no defense. That defense would allow Mertz, Morgan, even DJ to throw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. That defense is atrocious, and they return that same staff. They've utilized the portal, from what I can tell, more for offense than defense, which further sharpening your sword and your strength is a good thing, but that defense needs to be fixed, and the O-line needs to show improvement as well. And I don't know. How can this team be at 6? They're given the 5th best chance to reach the playoff. They're given nearly a 50% chance to win the Big 12. Are you kidding me? You can't be serious. It's asinine. When has Texas done anything of significance outside of maybe beating Georgia in 2018 in the Sugar Bowl, which again, New Year's Six Bowl win in a playoff-centered era. I am 19. I was born in 2002. I don't really have much memories, let alone of football or anything on TV besides cartoons, before I was 10 years old, because, I'm a kid doing stuff. When I was 10, which was, 2010, since 2010, Texas has been nothing. I don't get it. There's no reason to give them benefit of the doubt. They haven't had success in the past 4 years, so that part of the equation for the FPI is knocked out. Their recruiting class and transfer portal class is amazing, so I guess that would check the box. Same with quarterback and returning talent, but benefit of the doubt and statistics from the past season, which are counted, and returning starters should be counted too, and they're returning some bad starters on defense. I just don't get why they're number 6. But what's worse, in my opinion, because I can actually see Texas being a top 20 team if everything goes right, is Auburn. Because Auburn, I can understand why a computer algorithm which favors QB production would rank Texas at 6, because they had the best player in the 2023 class until he reclassified to 2022. They had the best player, or have the best player on their roster from that year before he reclassified, obviously. Auburn doesn't even have that. Auburn, you have Zach Calzada and TJ Findlay and some other kid. That's not 5-star talent at quarterback. They return some starters, but they lose a lot in the transfer portal, whereas Texas gains a significant amount in the transfer portal. Texas also has far superior talent to Auburn, if we're being honest, just all around. Texas has top 10 talent. Auburn, I think, maybe has top 15. I'm more inclined to say top 20. The only thing I can think of is the SEC. Look at this list. There's Alabama. There is Georgia. There is Auburn. There's LSU. There's Texas A&M. That's 5 SEC teams in the top 15. Ole Miss. Kentucky. That's 7 in the top 20. Mississippi State and Florida. That's 9 in the top 25. There's probably a slight amount of SEC bias. Part of the reason Auburn's probably ranked top 10 to a certain degree is, I'd say, Brian Harsin and his success at Boise State. and the amount of close games Auburn played too probably factors in. Plus the fact their strength of schedule is very tough. Some of the teams they beat this past season, I don't know. I find Auburn being in the top 10 much more of a mystery than Texas, but I guess it doesn't bother me in a certain sense as well, because I do think that Brian Harsin is a better head coach than Steve Sarkisian. But both of those still bother me, and that's why they're in the ugly. LSU is also in the ugly. I heard from Mike Valenti, now granted this was a while ago so it might have changed, that LSU did not have a single tight end on its roster. LSU also, they do have Jaden Daniels coming in at quarterback, which is, it's good. I think he will be the starter. And they do have talent all around, but it is year one. It is year one. Texas and Auburn are in year two. Their systems are being put together. Ed Orgeron, within 2 years, essentially busted what he made in 2019. And Brian Kelly, for as good of a job as he's done at Notre Dame, he played much easier schedules and such. The staff is nearly completely new. He's playing a tough schedule. LSU, I think that this is going to be a year where, like I mentioned with Penn State, they're going to have to stay afloat. Now, Brian Kelly's in year one, so Brian Kelly could go 6-6, and everything will be fine as long as he does something in 2023. So I would put LSU in the ugly category. I don't see how in year one they're going to be number 11, which would probably imply that they're going 9-4 or 10-3 when they're facing up against Jimbo Fisher, Nick Saban, Ryan Harsin. Don't forget Lane Kiffin either, who I think, don't forget Lane Kiffin or Mike Leach, who are underrated geniuses in their own division. That's LSU out of the way. And those are really it for the ugly. But LSU, not nearly in that, as they're not as deep in that category as Auburn and Texas are. LSU, I think, I have them going 7-5. Same thing with Auburn, but they're outside of that top 10. They're ranked the lowest. I actually have Texas too. I have Texas, Auburn, and LSU being 7 or 8 win teams. Texas is the most likely to win the most games because they're in the easier conference, although they do have a tough non-conference game as they host Alabama. That is the top 25 right there. Let me know down below in the comments what you think about this football power index that ESPN released. And finally, for about a minute or two, I'm going to just briefly mention some teams that are of interest who are outside of the top 25. North Carolina State, they return all those starters, right? Devin Leary is going to be solid. Dave Doran is finally have that 10-win season. They're number 26 in the FPI top 25. Iowa State and Matt Campbell, they're at number 27. Tennessee, they return Hendon Hooker. They had a good recruiting class. They're trying to get Brew McCoy and another wide receiver in the portal to further add to their offensive weaponry. Josh Heupel, he has all the momentum. They're at 28 in the FPI. Arkansas, they return KJ Jefferson, a very solid QB, one of the most effective in the nation. I thought ESPN and their FPI loved returning quarterback production. But Arkansas is at 29th. Wake Forest, 30th. Cincinnati, 32nd. UCLA, 34th. Nebraska, you got Casey Thompson, you got Trey Palmer, you got Mickey Joseph, who's one of the better wide receiver coaches in the country. You got Mark Whipple from Pitt, who we mentioned earlier. They're at 35. USC, you got Caleb Williams. They got Lincoln Riley. They have Alex Grinch, who I think is an overrated DC, but that's beside the point. USC is 37th. They're projected to go 8-4 or 7-5, more likely 7-5 than 9-4, which is pretty close to my prediction, actually. I think I have them going 8-4, but I'd more lean toward 9-3 than 7-5. But a lot of people have USC ranked, and I would agree with the FPI here. It's year one for Lincoln Riley trying to fix a busted culture and program. It's going to take a year. Iowa's at 38th. Spencer Petras and Alex Padilla have to be the worst QB duo in the Nope. Graham Mertz and Chase Wolf exist. Kansas State is at 39th, Minnesota at 40th, Purdue's at 44, BYU, who I have as a top 10 team, is 46th and projected to go 7-5. Looking at some other teams on this list, Houston is 49th, despite returning so much talent. And going down the rest of this list, that's basically it. Those teams that I mentioned were really all the teams of interest, in my opinion. And South Carolina too. How could we forget them? They're at 45th. So those are just some teams outside of the top 25 that could be of interest. Seeing USC at 37th was a shocker to me. Same thing with Nebraska at 35th and Iowa at 38th, just because Nebraska, I think, was close to top 25 this past season, going 3-9. Now they have a lower ranking, but they're projected to go 8-4 or 8-5 since they're actually favored to win the West by percentage. Shocker, I know. But that's really it for this video. If you like this video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, click the notification bell, and most importantly, comment your thoughts on ESPN's FPI down below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys around. Bye.